My parents evicted me for being a blue-collar failure. We need you to vacate the premises by Friday. The new owner wants to begin renovations immediately, and frankly, given the state of the arrears, you are lucky he is not suing for damages to the property. My mother sat there, clutching her pearl necklace like it was a lifeline, her knuckles white against the faux gold setting. My father, a man who hadn't looked me in the eye in 15 years, was turning a shade of purple I had only ever seen on bruised fruit. They were staring at the lawyer, then at the bank representative. And finally they looked at the empty chair at the head of the table. They didn't know who the new owner was. They just knew that their legacy, the sprawling Victorian estate they had leveraged to the hilt to fund my brother's third failed startup, was gone. The lawyer checked his watch and said, "Actually, the owner is here." He wanted to handle the final walkthrough personally. The heavy oak door creaked open. I walked in. I wasn't wearing the grease-stained overalls they remembered me in. I was wearing a bespoke suit that cost more than my brother's car. I didn't say a word. I just walked to the mahogany table, the same table where I was told I was worthless all those years ago, and I placed a set of rusted keys on the polished wood. They were the keys to the back shed, the keys they had thrown at me the night they kicked me out into the snow when I was 17. My mother gasped, a sound like a tire losing air. She whispered, "Lucas?" "Hello, Mother," I said, pulling out the chair at the head of the table and sitting down. "We have a lot to discuss regarding your eviction." Hello, everyone. Before we get into the rest of the story, I need to ask you a question. Have you ever been told that you were doing life wrong, simply because your path didn't look like everyone else's? I think a lot of us have. I'm using a throwaway account for this because, well, as you will soon find out, my family is extremely litigious and I prefer to keep my private life private. But I think it is finally time to tell the story of how I went from the black sheep of the family to the landlord of my own parents. I am Lucas, 34 years old. To understand why that boardroom moment felt better than winning the lottery, you have to understand where I came from. I grew up in a household that wasn't just obsessed with image, they were enslaved by it. My father was a mid-level executive at a finance firm who acted like he was the CEO of Wall Street. He wore suits on Saturdays. He insisted we call dinner supper and that we dress for it. My mother was a socialite in a town too small to have real socialites. Her entire existence revolved around the garden club, the historical society, and making sure our neighbors knew we were better than them. And then there was Preston. Preston was my older brother by 2 years. If Preston drew a stick figure, my parents framed it. If Preston got a C- in math, it was because the teacher didn't understand his creative genius. Preston was the golden child. He was charismatic, I will give him that. He had that oily charm that works on grandmothers and substitute teachers. He was the quarterback, the prom king, the guy who could talk his way out of a speeding ticket. Then there was me. I was the problem. I wasn't loud, I wasn't charming. I was obsessed with how things worked. While Preston was taking tennis lessons to build his network, I was in the garage taking apart the lawnmower to see the pistons fire. My hands were always stained with oil, grease, or dirt. To my parents, this was an affront to their existence. They wanted a doctor and a lawyer. They got a con man and a mechanic. The dynamic was subtle at first. At dinner parties, my father would introduce Preston as the future senator, and then gesture to me vaguely and say, "And this is Lucas. He is figuring things out." But the real divide happened when I was 16. I had saved up money from mowing lawns, secretly of course, because my mother forbade me from doing manual labor in the neighborhood, because it looked bad to the neighbors. She said it made us look destitute if her son was pushing a mower. But I did it anyway, 2 towns over. I saved every penny to buy a rusted-out 1969 Mustang Shell. It was a piece of junk to anyone else. No engine, floorboards rotted through, the suspension collapsed. But to me it was potential. It was freedom. I spent every waking hour in the back shed working on it. I learned to weld. I learned to fabricate metal. I learned the patience of sanding a fender for 12 hours straight until it was smooth as glass. I loved the smell of the garage, the mix of old oil, sawdust, and gasoline. It felt like real life, unlike the sterile, perfumed air of my parents' house. One evening, my parents hosted a garden party. The mayor was there. Preston naturally was holding court. telling some exaggerated story about his football practice, laughing too loud, drinking champagne he wasn't old enough to have. I was in the shed, grinding down a weld on the rear quarter panel. The noise must have carried. My father kicked the shed door open. He was wearing his white linen suit, holding a glass of scotch. The sparks from my grinder died down and I lifted my welding mask. "Turn that infernal machine off," he hissed. "I am almost done, Dad. I just need to finish this seam." "You are embarrassing us, Lucas." The mayor asked what that noise was. Do you know what I had to say? I had to say we were having plumbing work done because admitting my son is in a shed, playing grease monkey is humiliating. He looked at the car. He looked at my hands, black with grime. He looked at me with a level of disgust that I will never forget. "You are going to clean this up," he said. "And tomorrow you are getting rid of this trash." I stood up. "I bought this," I said. "It is mine. I paid for it with my own money." "Under my roof you own nothing," he spat. "You are a reflection of this family, and right now, you look like a servant." The next day, I came home from school to find the Mustang gone. The shed was empty. They had paid a scrap hauler to take it away. My tools were in a pile in the rain. When I ran inside screaming, asking where it was, my mother simply sipped her tea and said, "We are doing this for your own good. You need to focus on your SATs. Manual labor is for people who lack the intellect to do anything else. You will thank us one day." I didn't cry. I think that was the day the part of me that wanted their approval finally died. I just walked out to the rain, gathered my tools, dried them off, and put them in a box under my bed. I bided my time, I studied, I kept my head down. Fast forward to high school graduation. Preston had barely scraped by, but my parents threw him a gala that cost more than a starter home. They bought him a brand new BMW, they pulled strings to get him into a prestigious private college, paying full tuition plus a generous donation to the building fund to ensure his acceptance. I graduated with honors, I was in the top 10% of my class, but I didn't apply to the Ivy Leagues. I didn't apply to the State University Business Program. I applied to a specialized trade school for high-end fabrication and precision machining. I wanted to build engines for performance cars. I wanted to work with aerospace alloys. I wanted to make things that were real. When I showed them my acceptance letter, the silence in the kitchen was deafening. My mother picked up the letter like it was contaminated with anthrax. "A trade school," she said. "Like a plumber?" "It is precision machining, Mom. It is engineering. It is building things to a fraction of a millimeter. It is blue collar," my father said, putting his fork down. "We do not pay for trade school, Lucas. We are not paying for you to learn how to be a servant." "I am not asking you to pay for it," I said. "I got a full scholarship. You would think they would be proud. Full ride, zero cost, a guaranteed career path in a high-demand field." But no. "If you go to this school," my father said, his voice deadly quiet, "you are no longer our son. We will not have our name dragged through the mud because you want to work in a factory. You will go to the state university, you will study business or pre-law, or you can pack your bags tonight." I looked at Preston. He was smirking, eating a shrimp cocktail. He knew he had won. He would always be the prince, and I would always be the disappointment. "Okay," I said. My mom blinked. "Okay, you will go to university?" "No." "Okay, I will pack." I left that night with a duffel bag and $400 in my pocket. I slept under a bridge that first night because I was too proud to call my friends. I remember looking up at the concrete underside of the overpass, listening to the cars thunder overhead, and feeling a strange sense of peace. I was cold, I was hungry, and I was terrified, but I was free. The next 5 years were hell. I am not going to sugarcoat it. The romantic idea of the struggling artist or the struggling mechanic is only romantic in movies. In reality, it is exhausting. I lived in a studio apartment that was basically a closet with a hot plate. The shower was down the hall and shared with 3 other units. I ate ramen noodles and peanut butter for almost every meal. I went to school during the day, learning the intricacies of CAD design and metallurgy, and I worked the graveyard shift at a 24-hour industrial bakery to pay rent. I smelled like yeast and cutting fluid constantly. My hands were always cut up. My back ached. I got 4 hours of sleep on a good night. But I was good. I was really, really good. In the machine shop, everything made sense. Metal doesn't lie. If you cut it wrong, it is wrong. If you measure it right, it fits. There is no politics, no image, no snobbery. Just the work. In my second year, I met a man named Silas. Silas was a 70-year-old master machinist who ran a small, cluttered shop in the industrial district. He made custom parts for vintage Ferraris and ultra-rare watches. He was a grumpy, chain-smoking genius who hated everyone. He saw me looking at a complex lathe setup in the school workshop one evening. "You are holding that caliper wrong," he grunted from the doorway. "No," I said without looking up. "I'm compensating for the thermal expansion of the aluminum. It is 10 degrees hotter in here than the spec sheet allows, so I have to undercut it by 3 microns. Silas paused. He looked at the thermometer on the wall. He looked at me. He took a drag of his cigarette, which he wasn't supposed to have inside. "You looking for a job, kid?" That was the turning point. I started apprenticing under Silas. He taught me that machining isn't just about math. It is about feel. It is about listening to the metal. We worked on projects that blew my mind. We restored the engine block of a 1930s Bugatti that had been sitting in a barn in France for 50 years. We fabricated a replacement gear for a clock tower in London because the original manufacturer went out of business in 1890. I became obsessed with restoration manufacturing, making the parts that didn't exist anymore. Silas became the father figure I never had. He didn't care about my clothes or my social standing. He cared if I cleaned my tools and if my measurements were true. Meanwhile, I heard snippets about my family through the grapevine. Preston had graduated, barely, and my father had handed him a vice president position at his firm. They were taking vacations to the Maldives. They bought a second home in the Hamptons. They were living the high life. They never called, not once. I was erased from the family photos. To their friends, I simply didn't exist. When I was 24, Silas died of a heart attack. It crushed me. I was the only one at his funeral besides his estranged daughter, who just wanted to sell the shop's land. But Silas had left a will. He left the shop to me. It wasn't worth much on paper, just a lease on a dusty building and some old machines. But the reputation? That was worth millions. I rebranded Archimedes Restoration and Fabrication. I pivoted. I didn't just do cars. I started doing architectural salvage. You know those massive gilded gates on mansions in Newport? The intricate brass elevators in Art Deco skyscrapers in New York? When those break, you can't buy parts at Home Depot. You have to make them. And I was the only guy in the tri-state area who could do it to the millimeter. By 28, I made my first million. By 30, I was billing $5,000 an hour for consultation alone. I was flying to Dubai to oversee the installation of a custom titanium staircase I designed. I was working with museums to restore ancient mechanisms, but I stayed in the shadows. I didn't buy a Lamborghini to show off. I bought a reliable truck. I bought the building my shop was in. Then I bought the whole city block. I dressed in high-quality workwear, Carhartt, Red Wing boots, plain t-shirts. If you saw me on the street, you would think I was a construction foreman. And that is exactly how I liked it. I realized that real wealth doesn't need to scream. It whispers. My parents' wealth? That was screaming. It was loud, desperate, and fragile. My family, on the other hand, was getting louder. Preston had started a tech investment firm. From what I could tell, it was a Ponzi scheme wrapped in buzzwords. He was all over Instagram, flashing watches and cars. My parents were leveraging their house to fund his Series A rounds. I watched from a distance. I had a lawyer, Mr. Henderson, keep tabs on their public filings. Why? I told myself it was for safety, to make sure they didn't try to steal my identity. But deep down, I think I was waiting. I was waiting for the house of cards to fall. Then the crash happened. Not the stock market crash. The Preston crash. It turned out Preston had been using investor money to fund his gambling habit and pay off hush money to a string of mistresses. The SEC got involved. It was a massive scandal in our local area. My father's firm fired him to avoid the PR nightmare. They were bleeding cash, they sold the vacation home, they sold the cars, but they refused to sell the main estate, the symbol of their status. That Victorian mansion was the only thing keeping them tethered to their identity as important people. The first time I saw them in 10 years, they didn't see me. I was at a charity auction in the city. I was there to bid on a collection of vintage industrial molds. Very niche, very expensive. I was standing in the back, wearing a black suit, looking clean-shaven. My parents walked in. They looked older, tired. My mother's coat was a few seasons old, which for her was a catastrophe. My father looked like he hadn't slept in a week. They were there to keep up appearances, to pretend everything was fine. I watched Preston try to network. He was desperate, sweating, pitching some crypto idea to a guy who was clearly trying to get away from him. Sad, isn't it? I turned. It was a client of mine, a billionaire real estate developer named Arthur. We had worked together on restoring the fixtures in one of his historic hotels. What is? I asked. That family. The Vanderbilts of the strip mall. Arthur chuckled. They are drowning. The father is trying to get a loan from anyone with a pulse. They have got a balloon mortgage payment coming up on that estate of theirs. If they miss it, the bank forecloses. Is that so? I asked, sipping my water. Yeah. Prime real estate, though. If it goes to auction, I might pick it up. Bulldoze that gaudy house and put up condos. I looked at my parents. I looked at the house I grew up in, the house where I was told I was worthless, the house where my Mustang was stolen, the house where I was erased. I remembered the cold nights under the bridge. I remembered the smell of the bakery. I remembered Silas. Don't buy it, Arthur, I said quietly. Why not? Because, I said, a cold smile forming, I am going to. I didn't just want the house, I wanted them to know I was the one who took it. But not yet. I needed to be smart about this. I set up a shell company called Ouroboros Holdings. I instructed Mr. Henderson to approach the bank holding their mortgage. We bought the debt. Technically, I was now their lender. For 6 months, I let them sweat. I saw the missed payments roll in. I saw the desperate letters from my father begging for an extension. I read every single one of them. Dear sir or madam, we are a prominent family in the community. Temporary liquidity issue? Surely we can come to an arrangement. I denied every request, strictly by the book. No emotions, just business. I was treating them exactly how they treated me when I asked to keep my car. Rules are rules. Then Preston had his bright idea. He found out that Ouroboros Holdings was the new line holder. He didn't know it was me. He decided to try and charm the new owner. He sent an email inviting the CEO of Ouroboros to dinner at the estate to discuss a partnership. I accepted, but I sent a proxy. My assistant, Elena. She is sharp as a tack and terrifying when she wants to be. She went to the dinner wearing a wire. I sat in my office, listening to the audio feed in real time. It was pathetic. Preston hit on her. My father tried to explain that the property was actually worth double the market value. It wasn't. My mother complained about how hard it is to find good help these days. Then Elena dropped the bomb I told her to drop. The owner isn't interested in a partnership, she said, her voice cool and professional. He is interested in the property. Specifically, the garage. The garage? My father asked on the tape. Why? He hears it has sentimental value. Something about a Mustang? There was a long silence on the tape. I held my breath. I don't know what you were talking about, my father said, his voice trembling slightly. Elena stood up. You are 3 months behind. You have 30 days to pay the full arrears, $145,000, or we initiate foreclosure and eviction proceedings. They didn't pay. They couldn't. Preston tried to gamble his way to the money and lost another 10 grand. The clock ran out. The eviction date was set for 2 days after Thanksgiving. Cruel? Maybe. Poetic? Absolutely. But they refused to leave quietly. They decided to host a Save Our Home gala on Thanksgiving, inviting all their remaining rich friends, trying to guilt-trip someone into bailing them out. It was a Hail Mary pass. I decided to attend. I drove my car this time, not a Mustang, a vintage Aston Martin DB5 that I had restored from the ground up. It was gunmetal gray, flawless, and worth more than their house and their neighbor's house combined. I pulled into the long driveway. Valets were parking cars. Even on the brink of ruin, they hired valets. I rolled down the window. The valet looked at the car, eyes wide. "Nice ride, sir," he said. "Thanks," I said. "Keep it close." I walked to the front door. The security guard, hired to keep out the riffraff, stopped me. "Invitation?" he asked. "I don't need one," I said, handing him my business card. Lucas Thorne, owner, Archimedes R&F. He didn't know what that meant, but he knew the fit of the suit. He stepped aside. I walked into the grand foyer. It smelled the same, lavender and desperation. There were maybe 30 people there. The atmosphere was grim. My mother was holding court in the living room, weeping into a handkerchief, while Preston drank heavily by the fireplace. "It is just so unfair," my mother was saying to a bored-looking woman. "This predatory company. They are targeting us because they are jealous of our standing." "Excuse me," I said. The room went quiet. My voice had changed in 15 years. It was deeper, more authoritative. It was the voice of a man who managed 50 employees and negotiated million-dollar contracts. My mother turned. She squinted. "Who are—" Then she saw the scar on my chin from a bicycle accident when I was 7. "Lucas?" she whispered. Preston laughed, slurring his words. "Well, look who it is. The grease monkey returns." "Did you come to fix the toilet? We can't pay you, bro." I walked to the center of the room. I noticed the carpet was threadbare in spots they had covered with rugs. I noticed the paint peeling near the ceiling. The illusion of perfection was crumbling. "I am not here to fix anything, Preston," I said. "I am here to inspect my property." My father stepped forward. He looked smaller than I remembered. "Get out. You were disowned. You have no business here." "Actually," I said, reaching into my inside pocket, "I have every business here." I pulled out the deed. I pulled out the foreclosure notice. "You see Ouroboros Holdings? That is me. I bought your debt 6 months ago. I own this house. I own the shed you tore down. I own the ground you were standing on." The silence wasn't just quiet. It was a vacuum. You could hear the antique clock ticking on the mantel, a clock I realized that was a replica, not an original. "That is a lie," my mother whispered. "You work in a factory. You are a failure." "I own the factory, Mother," I said. "I own 3 of them. I restore history for people who actually appreciate it." "And you?" I looked around the decaying room. "You just destroy things." Preston charged me. It was sad, really. He swung a sloppy, drunk punch. I didn't even have to hit him. I just stepped aside. He tripped over an ottoman and face-planted into the carpet. "Preston!" my mother shrieked. My father was shaking. You can't do this to family." "Family?" I laughed. It was a cold, hard sound. "Family helps you with homework. Family doesn't steal your car. Family doesn't make you sleep under a bridge. You aren't family, you are tenants. And you are being evicted." I turned to the guests. "I suggest you all leave. This party is over. And by the way, the champagne is cheap sparkling wine. I wouldn't drink it." The room cleared out in under 2 minutes. It was just me and them. I gave them the legal minimum time to vacate. They tried to sue, of course. They claimed I had obtained the property fraudulently. My lawyer, Mr. Henderson, enjoyed destroying them in court. He presented the years of financial mismanagement, the clear paper trail of my purchase, and the recording of them admitting they had no money. The judge threw their case out and ordered them to pay my legal fees. They lost everything. So where are they now? Preston is currently facing fraud charges for his investment scheme. He lives in a 1-bedroom apartment with 3 roommates. He calls me once a month asking for seed capital. I have his number blocked, but he leaves voicemails. My parents moved into a small condo in a neighboring town. My mother had to get a job for the first time in her life. She works at a department store perfume counter. My father sits at home, bitter, telling anyone who will listen that his ungrateful son stole his legacy. And me? I renovated the estate. I didn't keep the house, though. I hated that house. It had too many ghosts. I turned the main building into a scholarship center for trade students. Kids who want to be mechanics, welders, plumbers, and electricians. Kids whose parents told them they were too smart for manual labor can come here, live for free, and learn a craft. But the garage? I rebuilt the shed exactly where it used to be. Inside sits a 1969 Mustang, fully restored, painted a deep midnight blue. Every Thanksgiving, I go out to that shed. I open a beer, I put on some music, and I listen to the engine purr. It is the sweetest sound in the world. Looking back, I realized that getting kicked out was the best thing that ever happened to me. If I had stayed, I would have become like Preston, hollow, fake, and dependent. Instead, I was forced to build myself from the ground up, just like that car. Sometimes, late at night, I drive past the department store where my mother works. I see her standing there, spraying perfume on cards for strangers, forcing a smile. I don't stop. I don't wave. I just shift gears and drive on. Because I have work to do. And in my world, work is the only thing that matters. Now, let me go deeper into the years that really defined this. I skipped over the grind earlier, but I think it is important to understand the texture of those 5 years of silence. When I say I lived in a closet, I mean it. The room was 6 feet by 10 feet. The window didn't close all the way, so in the winter I had to tape plastic over it. I woke up seeing my breath. The bakery job was brutal. It wasn't a cute artisan bakery, it was an industrial factory that made bread for supermarkets. My job was to clean the mixing vats. These vats were the size of hot tubs. I had to climb inside them with a scrub brush and a hose, scrubbing away the sticky, hardening dough residue in 100-degree heat. My arms would cramp so bad I couldn't hold a pencil in class the next morning. But that job taught me discipline. It taught me that if you don't do the work, the dough hardens and becomes impossible to remove. It taught me that problems don't go away if you ignore them. They just calcify. And Silas? Silas was a nightmare in the best way. He didn't just teach me machining, he taught me how to see. One day I was making a simple bolt for a vintage tractor. I thought I was done. Silas walked over, picked it up, and ran his thumb over the threads. "Do it again," he said. "Why?" "It fits the spec." "It feels rough," he said. "You rush the final pass." "The customer won't see it, but they will feel it when they turn the wrench." "Do it again." I made that bolt 4 times. By the 4th time, it was perfect. It spun onto the nut like it was floating on air. That was the standard. Perfection wasn't a goal. It was the baseline. When I started my own company, that philosophy is what set me apart. In a world of disposable products and planned obsolescence, I was selling permanence. I remember my first big break after Silas died. A wealthy collector in Greenwich had a 19th century automaton, a mechanical singing bird in a gilded cage. It hadn't worked in 80 years. 3 other restorers had tried and failed. I spent 3 months on that bird. I had to fabricate a spring the width of a human hair. I had to reverse engineer a gear train that had no blueprints. I barely slept. I became obsessed. When I finally delivered it, the collector gathered his family to watch. I wound the key. The bird fluttered its metal wings, opened its beak, and sang a clear, beautiful note. The collector, a man worth billions, had tears in his eyes. He wrote me a check for $50,000 on the spot. But more importantly, he told his friends, that is how it started. Not with marketing, not with Instagram, but with undeniable competence. And that is what my family never understood. They thought success was about who you knew, what parties you went to, and what brand of watch you wore. They didn't understand that real value comes from what you can do, not what you can buy. Preston could buy a watch, but he couldn't fix one. He could drive a car, but he couldn't build one. He was a consumer. I was a creator. And in the long run, the creator always wins. During the foreclosure process, there was a moment I didn't mention. About 2 weeks before the eviction, I ran into an old friend from high school, Mark. Mark was the only guy who didn't mock me for the trade school thing. We met for coffee. "You know your parents are telling people they are downsizing by choice?" Mark said. "Oh, really?" I asked. "Yeah, your mom is saying they are moving to a condo because the estate is just too big for the 2 of them now. She says they want to travel more." I laughed. "Travel where? To the unemployment line?" Mark looked at me. "You know, everyone talks about you. Legend has it you are dead or in jail." "Let them talk," I said. It was satisfying to know that their narrative was so disconnected from reality. They were lying to their friends, lying to themselves, right up until the bitter end. It made the reveal at the gala so much sweeter. When I walked into that room, I wasn't just exposing my success, I was exposing their lies. I was popping the bubble they had lived in for 40 years. The legal battle that followed was messy. They tried to claim that I had used insider information to buy the debt, which was ridiculous because their debt was public record for anyone who knew where to look. They tried to claim elder abuse, saying I was taking advantage of their senility. My lawyer, Mr. Henderson, actually laughed out loud in the deposition when they suggested that. Mr. Thorne, Henderson said to my father, "You are 58 years old. You are the former vice president of a finance firm. Are you admitting on the record that you are mentally incompetent?" My father turned red and shut up. They had no cards to play. They were used to bullying people with money and influence. But for the first time in their lives, they were up against someone with more money and more influence. The renovations on the estate took 2 years. I gutted the interior. I tore down the floral wallpaper, ripped up the shag carpets, and removed the crystal chandeliers that my mother loved so much. I exposed the original brickwork. I installed industrial lighting. I turned the ballroom into a lecture hall. I turned the servants' quarters into dormitories. The first class of students arrived last September. 20 kids, all of them on full scholarships. I teach a class once a week on business ethics and precision manufacturing. I tell them my story. I tell them that the world will try to tell them they are less than because they work with their hands. I tell them that the world is wrong. One of the students, a girl named Sarah who wants to be a welder, asked me if I ever miss my family. I thought about it. I thought about the holidays spent alone. I thought about the graduation they missed. I thought about the Mustang. No, I told her, I don't miss them. I miss the idea of them. I miss the parents I wished I had. But the people they actually were? No, I don't miss them at all. Sometimes the best family is the one you build. My employees, my students, my friends, that is my family now. And unlike my parents, they don't care about my bank account. They care about my character. So that is the full story. From the shed to the boardroom, from the outcast to the owner. It has been a long road, but looking at that Mustang in the garage, I know I drove the right way. If there is one thing I want you to take away from this, it is this. Do not let anyone define your worth. Not your parents, not your teachers, not society. If you have a passion, chase it. If you want to build things, build them. If you want to be a mechanic, be the best damn mechanic the world has ever seen. Because at the end of the day, competence is the only currency that matters. The rest is just noise. And if anyone tries to stop you, well, just buy their house. Thank you for listening. This has been a long time coming. I feel lighter just saying it all out loud. If you enjoyed this story, please share it. Maybe there is another kid out there in a shed somewhere who needs to hear it. And to that kid, I say, keep grinding. Your time will come. Goodbye for now.